Earlier today, a federal jury found disgraced lawyer, Tom Girardi, guilty of 4 counts of wire fraud. He was found guilty of those counts for having victimized his own clients. This verdict represents a remarkable fall from grace for Mr. Girardi. Mr. Girardi took advantage of his clients when they were most in need. Mr. Girardi portrayed himself as a champion for the little guy. He marketed himself as the lawyer for Aaron Brockenham. He cultivated an image of a lawyer who fought against corporate greed, and even claimed to be himself a champion of justice. He even had a radio show by that name. But Mr. Girardi was no champion of justice. In fact, he was a perpetrator of injustice, victimizing his own clients when they were most vulnerable and most in need. To understand the full depravity and the shame of what Mr. Girardi did, it's important to understand the context. First, the greed. Mr. Girardi was a lawyer who had it all. He was considered one of the best lawyers in America. He had one of the biggest and most successful firms in America. He had great influence with other lawyers and with judges. He even portrayed himself repeatedly as one of the top lawyers in America in magazines and other publications. And he was paid very well for all that he did. But that wasn't enough for him. He wanted even more. His insatiable appetite for money is what led him to court and what led to this verdict today. Secondly, it's important to understand the breach of trust involved in what Mr. Girardi did. As lawyers, we all have duties to our clients, duties of trust to our clients. Mr. Girardi had that duty of trust, but especially with the clients that he had, people who were most vulnerable, people who had gone through traumatic incidents, people who were desperately in need of his help, people who were not lawyers and relied on his expertise. Yet Mr. Girardi chose to take advantage of those very same clients, those vulnerable people, the ones who've gone through traumatic incidents, in order to enrich himself. This is what I mean by truly repugnant and shameful conduct. We know that today's verdict cannot repair all the damage that has been done by Mr. Girardi, but we hope that the fact that he has been brought to justice, that a verdict has been found and he is found guilty of 4 counts of wire fraud, will bring some comfort to the many victims of his reprehensible crime. I will now bring to the podium, to the virtual podium, Special Agent in charge of IRS criminal investigation, Tyler Hatcher.
Thank you, Martine. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As stated, I'm Tyler Hatcher. I'm the Special Agent in charge of IRS criminal investigation. I want to thank U.S. Attorney Martin Estrada and his team and our team during the lengthy process of this trial. Today's guilty verdict is another example of work in safeguarding victims of fraud. Approximately 2 years ago, Martin Estrada challenged us in IRS criminal investigation and our other federal partners to take an aggressive stance and to hold those who betray the public's trust, accountable for those actions. And I think today's guilty verdict highlights our efforts in holding professionals in positions of trust accountable. The evidence displayed during trial showed that Mr. Girardi exploited his clients in their various times of need. Many of his clients suffered life-altering injuries and other catastrophes. And instead of ensuring timely payment on their lawsuits, Mr. Girardi used those awards to fund his lavish lifestyle and to pay other settlements. Unfortunately for him, IRS criminal investigation special agents are the best in the world at following the money, especially when fraud leaves that trail. I want to also reflect on the guilty verdict as our outstanding investigative work by IRS criminal investigation, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and our partners at FBI. It should serve as an example for those who might try to follow Mr. Girardi's footsteps, that we will hold you accountable. Protecting vulnerable citizens is some of the most rewarding work that we do at IRS criminal investigation. And I thank you for your time. Good afternoon.
I'm Ted Dox, Special Agent in Charge of FBI Los Angeles Criminal Division. With this verdict, Tom Girardi is finally being held accountable for his egregious actions. For years, Mr. Girardi has built callously his clients to gain for only his self-interest and for greed. This is a case in which the FBI will always do every resource to get individuals like this, because this is something that we take very seriously. We know it impacts the community. Mr. Girardi also, he took his position as a lawyer, and he betrayed the trust of so many folks. I will tell you that the FBI is grateful for the partnerships we have with IRS, Criminal Investigative Division, as well as the U.S. Attorney's Office to hold these individuals accountable. They were significant in their assistance in helping to bring this particular case to a successful outcome. Thank you.
I'll now take questions. Before I do though, I want to give thanks where it's deserved. The IRS and the FBI did a phenomenal and comprehensive investigation in this case. They were very thorough, left no stone unturned. I also want to particularly recognize the Assistant United States Attorneys in my office responsible for this. They would say Scott Payne and Ali Mogadas. I also want to note some of the investigators in this case, particularly IRS agents Ryan Roberson, Ryan Iwamoto, Ryan Bennett, and FBI Special Agent Elias Herrera. Now the questions.
I have two questions. Well, what is for you? So he's 85 years old and he's in an assisted living center, a memory care center, Orange County. What's going to happen with him at sentencing? Do you send an 85-year-old man to prison, or could he be put on house arrest, or how does this work?
So sentencing is set for December of this year. I believe it's December 6th, if I'm not mistaken. Just to make sure I get you an accurate date. Yes, December 6th is the sentencing in this case. We are not going to prejudge that. We will look at all the facts as they come in. There'll be a comprehensive report that is prepared by the probation department. We'll look at all the facts in terms of recommending our sentence. But the mere fact that he is older, an older adult, does not mean we will not seek prison time. It's important in a case like this not only to punish the wrongdoer, but to send a message to others out there who would think of doing the same thing, that there will be serious consequences for this type of misconduct.
My second question is for...
So the statutory maximum sentence he faces for 4 counts of wire fraud is 80 years in federal prison. There's something called the sentencing guidelines. We will look at that to determine what the appropriate sentence is. Again, we have to look at all the facts and circumstances. And by the way, another important part of sentencing is hearing from the victims. The victims will have a right to address the court, either personally or in writing. And that will certainly affect the ultimate sentence that he receives.
What else?
I think you've heard a lot about that in court, how he was a very successful lawyer and made millions and millions of dollars, but he essentially operated a vast and comprehensive Ponzi scheme. And so he'd pay out some, he'd take others, he'd steal money over time in court. And of course he had a very lavish lifestyle. You just have to watch a little bit of television to see how lavishly he was living.
How
You
does
had
it...
a question, yes?
Yeah, so what's the exact number? I know initially it was reported that he embezzled more than 15 million. There will be since 10 million. Is there a number that we can do?
So we will leave it at tens of millions of dollars. We now need to do further looking at the facts. The probation department will look. Because we had, in this case, certainly 4 victims whose stories were heard. We expect other victims to come forward and hear more about some of the issues they dealt with, which will likely increase the loss at issue in this case.
The fact that Girardi put in, $80 to $100 million of his own money back into the firm, how does that fit in with your narrative?
I won't confirm any amounts, so I don't know how much money he actually
Tens of
put
millions.
into. No, I won't confirm any amount. I won't confirm any amount that he actually put in, but in a Ponzi scheme, as you heard at trial, it's very typical for someone to keep the Ponzi scheme running by putting in some funds of their own. That doesn't mean he did not doesn't mean he's not guilty of a fraud offense, and it doesn't mean that he left many, many victims irreparably damaged by his actions.
So are you saying you're gonna have prosecutors actually ask the judge to consider uncharged victims at sentencing? Victims who were not part of the trial, you're gonna want her to consider their situations for sentencing?
So in every case, there's the potential to look more comprehensively at the conduct of the defendant, things that were not necessarily brought out of trial. It's known as relevant conduct in the federal system, and we want to do a comprehensive look at everything Mr. Girardi is responsible for. Yes.
I had a question for the FBI or IRS special agent. How did you guys break this case? Like, what was the first thing where you're like, something's not right here?
No, that's a great question. In IRS criminal investigation, we get involved when there's a lot of money, and as you can imagine, victims need to be heard, and that's one thing that we pay very, very close attention to. As I said in my comments, we've taken an aggressive approach to essentially trying to make victims whole. So in this case, victims are very loud when they start losing money.